When you're viewing a house, I mean, the first thing you want to do is just start at the outside. What does the roof look like? What do the gutters look like? What does the ridge tiles look like? Is there any damp, any cracks? You know, what's the garden look like? Do you need to do the front door, etc.? And then, equally, head through the house as you would, and head out the back. So, yeah, I mean, if the door's shaking like that, it kind of tells you enough about it, really, doesn't it? So yeah, we've got a bit of a lean-to here, which has definitely seen better days. To be honest, don't need it. I'd take it off. It'd be cheaper to take it off and bin it than it would be to, you know, try and replace it or repair it. And ultimately, if you put the same kind of corrugated sheeting on, it's going to fail in a few years anyway. So keep the costs down. That's from a gutter. I don't know where it was meant to be. Also, when you're outside, make sure you have a good look at the chimney. So a good chimney should have good pointing. It may or may not be capped. That's not a real major issue. And the flashing should be in good condition, and it should be straight. So obviously, if it's leaning, that is not a good sign. So always have a good look at the chimney. They can cost a little bit of money, something you want to have a look into. This chimney looks all right. I think we'll get away without doing anything. Of course, if there's damp inside from the chimney, then there's a problem with it. And then come back outside, you know, have a look and try and tie all the different pieces together. The ridge tiles look okay. They have been replaced since the roof was put on. No major issues. There's a bit of moss on it, so we'll expect to have it cleaned up. Water drains away from the house, which is good to see. Garden needs a tidy. Probably just need to skip, to be honest, get rid of most of the stuff here. You want to look at everything, basically. Inside, outside, electrics, heating, and then obviously the general condition is stuff you're going to see, painting, flooring, etc. I don't really need to state that, but of course, spec for it if necessary. But the things you're really looking for are problems. So when I first look into a house, I'm like, okay, what problems has it got? If it's got no problems, then I'll start looking, okay, how can we reconfigure it? What are we going to use this room for, etc., etc. But I get to that at the end. My first focus is, okay, what's wrong? Where are my money pits going to be? Where are my big costs? So I've got a little bit of a flat roof here on top of this bay window. Now we'll go inside and have a look at it. It's very, very hard to tell sometimes with flat roofs if they've perished or not, and they can go overnight instantly without any sort of, you know, prior warning. Something like that, there's simply no point repairing it. You would just replace the whole thing. It's not super expensive. And to be honest, if there's no damp, there's no real signs of it leaking inside, then I wouldn't bother. You usually will know fairly quickly, especially in a house like this, which clearly has been empty for, you know, at least several months. We've had some heavy rain recently. Like, you would know if there was damp inside this. If it's, you know, just fading, when you might not know, but, you know, a couple of weeks of rain and you're going to see the damp on the inside pretty quickly if there is an issue with it. I haven't actually been in that room yet, so let's have a look and see if it's okay. So when you've got wooden floors, you just want to make sure that they're not springy. So if I jump on this, it feels solid. Obviously it's wooden, you can hear it, you know, it's obviously not a solid concrete pad. But you just want to have a walk around, make sure that obviously nothing's rotten, nothing's falling in. It feels strong and sturdy. A floor shouldn't really move. The other thing to note, you've got chimney, you know, have a look around the base of the chimney, have a feel, is it damp? Especially something like this when, you know, they've clearly taken out a fireplace or whatever and capped it. You want to know, you know, is it damp? This is good. I think, to be honest, that would be better for the house than leaving it closed. And in a house like this, like, someone's going to come and rip it apart anyway, so I wouldn't worry or feel bad about doing this. Like, you need to view a house and see what it's like for you. If you need to move furniture, move furniture. You know, if someone's living in the house, ask. This is clearly like empty, in need of refurb. So yeah, flat roof looks all right. No massive issues. Got a bit of cracking here, but this looks more like a tear in the. You know, it's nothing too major. Potentially, this is moving that way a little bit, but it's quite a small crack. It's just there. You know, it hasn't extended down here, so I think we'll be okay. Yeah, usually if it's more than a few millimeters, you want to have it looked at, but that one doesn't look too bad for me. Although you can see the wallpaper is being pulled a little bit. Again, another fireplace with. I love how they used to just put the gas pipe just sticking out the ground. I love that. You'd never be allowed to do that these days, but there we go. The floor feels fairly solid. The chimney didn't look too bad from outside. I didn't expect to see any issues, but maybe you will. Maybe you won't. Feels pretty dry. Of course, get a damp meter if you want to do it, but to be honest, if you feel stuff, you will be able to tell if something's wet. Now, this bay looked a little bit interesting from outside, like it could be dropping. There's a bit of cracking outside. It doesn't look horrendous, but we'll have a look upstairs and see if there's any more sides there, because it'll be moving more upstairs than it will down. This room's all right. Obviously, we'll take the fireplace out. A normal refurb for a house. So look at this boiler. I mean, Glowworm's a fairly cheap brand. Usually when I see a Glowworm, I'm not massively filled with confidence. You know, you've got Ideal make decent boilers, and obviously Worcester Bosch, they're a popular brand, they make good boilers as well. Potterton are again on the cheaper side, but I hear mixed reviews. I think they last all right, some people don't. It's kind of up to you. The things I like to see, are this here. So you're looking for a big black thing, basically. It's a magnet clean. It basically takes all the gunk out of the pipes as it gets circled through. These weren't common practice until fairly recently. So if you see this, it's probably been put in recently. The boiler itself looks fairly new. I mean, just general things. How old does it look? Like, yes, obviously styles changed, etc. So you can see that, you know, this is a more modern design, rounded corners, etc. versus an older one. Usually there'll be like a flap or whatever to open up. And if you can see when it was serviced, obviously if it was serviced recently, that's great. But you can also get an idea then of how old it is by how old the service history is. We would say if it's over 10 years, probably replace it. Unless, you know, you've got really good service history and it's been looked after, then you're probably going to be okay. But to be honest, it's one of those where you kind of take a view, and if you're not sure, then budget to replace it. And if you don't need to, then obviously your quid's in. This one will be fine. We aren't going to do anything about that. Other thing to note, especially if you're planning on putting en suites in and things like that, this is a 24CX. That 24 most likely refers to the number of kilowatts it is. So this will be a 24 kilowatt boiler, which is fine for heating, but if we want to put more than, well, depending on what the shower that in this place already is, you're not going to want to put loads and loads of en suites on here because it's just not powerful enough. That's when you look at the consumer unit and the main fuse into the house. If you've got a 60 amp fuse, that's kind of small, especially for like a 4 or 5 bed HMO, but for a regular house, it's more than enough. All new houses these days are built with 100 amp fuses. If you've got 100 amps, you'll definitely be able to run at least 2 or 3 showers through the electrics, and that way, obviously, I'm going to put stress on the boiler. Any wooden external doors you're going to want to replace with UPVC. They're better for security, better for, you know, looks and design anyway. Banisters, make sure they're just on they're sturdy and they're on the wall. You don't want them falling around or anything like that. Standard bit of play is okay, but you don't want too much. It's quite a big house, actually. We've got 4 rooms up here. Obviously, if you can't find the fuse box for some reason, or, you know, someone just takes a video for you, views the house for you and you can't find out. Obviously, when was the last time you saw a light switch like this? This is a good indicator of the age of the electrical work in the house. And the fact that, you know, you've got a really old light switch will probably suggest the place needs a rewire. And in this particular occasion, it does. Doors. Change the doors in the house will really change, you know, the feel of it when you walk in. You know, obviously paint and carpet are 2 majorly big things. But doors, man, you know, this is not a horrible door, but it's quite dated in terms of style. And given we're going to be doing some plaster work on this house for certain, you know, I would change all the doors and then the door frames to go with. New ones look an awful lot better. I personally really like cottage style doors, which if you just Google cottage style doors, you'll be able to see a picture of what they look like, and that's what we put in here. And you can paint them as well if you want to paint them. So in HMOs, we tend to paint them like a nice anthracite grey, or in a singlet, you can leave them, you know, nice wooden colour if you want to go down that vibe. What I'd say is, you know, if you're going to leave wood on the walls, then maybe leave some wood elsewhere or some soft browns somewhere to kind of tie things in. I am not an interior designer. I do not claim or profess to be one, but continuity of colours throughout a house is a basic thing that will really make it look an awful lot better for you. We've got another fireplace up in the bedroom, which is not uncommon. This old wood chip wallpaper will have to come off and will probably mean we'll be plastering this room. Clearly it had a wardrobe in here, hence this sort of black stuff here is probably a little bit of condensation damp and a bit of dust, just because there was a piece of furniture here that was obviously against the wall and you've got a nice trap of cold air there. Moisture will condense and obviously give you a bit of condensation damp. Again, a few cracks in the ceiling, but they're not major or big enough, and they're not in consistent places to really give me any cause for concern. You know, cracks are cracks, but not every crack is a major problem. Some, yes. You know, obviously if you've got extensions and bay windows and things like that, they're obviously prime examples, or if you've got heavy movement or subsidence, but you should be able to tell that. It'd be very, very obvious. You know, a consistent crack through 2 floors, so say there was a crack on this wall, I went downstairs into the room below and it continued, you'd be like, okay, that's a concern. But little things like this, going in all different directions, you know, it's more likely to be the plaster than anything else, especially given the age of the place. These windows are double glazed, and given that we will want to keep the refurb down on this, I wouldn't change them. There's no trickle vents, which would really help this place. In fact, if this place had trickle vents, you know, it wouldn't smell quite as bad. If you've got a house and you're leaving it open, empty for a bit, like just take like a window like this where no one can get in, and then just like lock it open. Do you know what I mean? So you've got a little bit of air coming in. That'll stop you getting a lot of condensation damp. If you ever choose to refurb it, it might save you a little bit of money. Right, prime example of why your door should open the correct way. So right now, you've got to open the door and then go around the door to go to the toilet. Now I appreciate you're going to close the door anyway, but it doesn't make sense. If the door opened that way, you have way more space, but then you couldn't because the radiator's there, because they put the radiator in the wrong place. Fit a slightly narrower door and then put a heated towel rail up there. Or even on this wall, you'd have room, but if you go to the bathroom, it would rejig. But yeah, replace the bathroom. I'd probably stick with an electric shower, given the size of the boiler and the size of the house. That is an old light, wow. Yeah. These are type 11 radiators. If I'm honest with you, They're not in horrible condition. The question would be this: when you come to change the TRVs, that's these valves on the end, when you come to change them, if you put a new one on and it just strips the thread and starts leaking, you're gonna have to replace the radiator. Replacing radiators can make your house quite a bit more expensive. You wanna replace the radiators through a house, you're looking at 250 quid a radiator minimum. They're not the cheapest thing. You can easily add 2-3 grand to your refurb without trying. So most of the time we just look to paint them, clean them up if they work. If you've got a really old radiator that doesn't work, then fair enough, but this does at least have the fins out the back. So I don't think it's actually that old. This radio anyway, this specific one can stay. Sometimes houses will move a little bit over the years, then just stop moving. That's just the house settling over time. When you first build a house, it'll move a little bit anyway, even though you put your foundations in, ground moves and all the rest of it. And you should be able to tell when you walk into a room, like, is it level or is it not? If you look at the skirting, it's a little bit more difficult with laminate when it folds up. But if you've got like a no gap at one end of the room and a big gap of skirting at the other, it's a good way to be able to visually see the drop in the floor if there is one. That crack would suggest if there is any movement, it's dropping that way. So usually when you see a crack, you want to go at a 45-degree angle, and that is the way that the thing will be moving. So if you've got a crack in this direction, it would suggest that that end is falling away. When you walk this way, it's walking downhill. If you stand this way, you can feel the weight is more on your heels versus this way, it's more on the front of your feet. You should be able to feel that. If you can't learn to ski, it'll give you a bit more feeling in your feet. Also, look at that. You can literally see it's bent. I mean, if you want a visual representation, look, here's the line for the bit at the bottom of the window frame, and then it just disappears here. The whole house is falling that way a little bit. This is why I say as a deal source when someone's viewing houses, you haven't got to be a genius to spot a problem. We've seen that there is something going on here, or at least there was at some point if there isn't now. You don't have to know why it was caused or even how to fix it. I would recommend you have a survey on this house. The fix for this, if it is still moving, would be to underpin that corner, which is a little bit expensive. If it's like historical movement, then it's fine. In fact, there's a pub near me called the Crooked House. You walk in completely sober and you think you're drunk because it's like the floors are everywhere, but it's a bit of a feature, and it's because of huge subsidence because it's built over mine shafts. But it's completely stable now and it hasn't moved for 200 years or something crazy. So you can obviously leave a house a bit crooked. I mean, I wouldn't have it that crooked in a house. What I would do is work it out and say, look, put your offer in, subject to survey, and work out, it's probably gonna cost anywhere from sort of 3 grand to 15 grand, depending on the scale. It's a lot of money. Underpinning is hugely expensive. Because you've got to dig down underneath the foundations and basically put a big steel rod in underneath to push the house up and support it. And then you're just transparent up front with the agent. They can't complain if you're honest and say, look, I'd still have to buy it, and if there's a problem, I've got to fix it. I don't want someone living in the house and it falling over. It's not the end of the world. Even the stairs feel wonky actually when you walk down.